So the bases were loaded. It was a tie game. It was the last bats, and I was up. I love that kind of stuff. I love that kind of pressure. The whole game, I'd been running into the bush and trying to pee. I was in so much pain. I was so uncomfortable. I got called to come out of the bush, and nobody knew where I was, really. And I came up to bat, and I struck out. And I went home more concerned about that than my health. I thought about it for a while, and I'm thinking, it's just going to go away. This is just temporary. And it did. A couple of months later, I was asked to be an MC for a former student's wedding. And that morning, that pain came back so intense. I was on stage doing my MC thing and trying to do the best job I possibly could, and I had to keep saying, I'm just going to take a break. You guys have a drink. And I was in the washroom with my head against the wall, just in incredible pain. And when the reception was finished, I got through the evening. I went straight to the hospital. And that's when the test started, and I started having to go and get this checked and that checked, and cystologies and tubes and these things. And thank goodness for my partner Holly, my wife Holly, who came with me, because it's interesting what you hear and what you don't hear going to those things, the stress and the discomfort. I remember coming home one day, I said, Holly, I only have a month. And she said, yes, till your next appointment. Settle down. So this led to me having a biopsy, which kind of went sideways, and then I ended up in St. Mary's. Now, being a resident on the Sunshine Coast for a little over 40 years, it's difficult to be in St. Mary's Hospital. I came in, and the person who had admitted me say, did my son's presentation was he really doing a good job last week? And the nurses are former students, and I had to get wheeled down to get a CT, and people were stopping in the hallways and go, Barry, what are you doing? What's going on? And I went under a ladder, and the ladder was going way up in the ceiling in St. Mary's, and I was just lying there like this, looking up, and the electrician looked down and said, Krangle, what the hell are you doing down here? So being on the Sunshine Coast when you know everybody, and sometimes you feel like, oh, I would like some anonymity. I would just like to hide my head in the sand. But St. Mary's is an incredible hospital. The care, the concern. I was just looked after so well. And I tell you, I just, my experiences there, if I ever hear anybody say anything about Scary Marys, I'm just going after them. Because boy, oh boy, that place and the doctors and the care is just amazing. So the waiting for the verdict was the hard thing. It was suspected I might have bladder cancer, but I wasn't sure. So I was waiting, and I got a phone call, and sure enough, it turned out to be bladder cancer. And dealing with that, the night was the worst. Just lying there wondering, what does that mean? At what stage am I at? What's going on? And it was a very, very difficult time for me. And personally, I just went in. I didn't really want to talk about it. I didn't want to share it with friends. And those kinds of things are such a family thing. It was really difficult telling my daughters. They suspected the worst, and Holly was just so good at keeping everything calm and keeping everything even. And the only thing I could do was to up my exercise. I like looking at Larry's facts here. You know, I eat well, I exercise well, I'm not controlled by stress, all those sort of things. I was really shocked, and I was really depressed. When the verdict came, and I did find out it was cancer and went through the chemo, I was hoping that was it. And all signs pointed to things being perfect. I was so excited, and I just got a brand new job. I was hired as the principal, the new principal of Madeira Park. After 34 years of teaching, I thought, well, I want to give this a shot. And after all the abuse I'd given principals over the year, I think it was my turn to take a little. So I got up to Madeira, and things were good. I was feeling great, and I had to go for a cystology, for one last kind of check. But I was sure everything was good. The chemo went well. There'd been other complications, but they'd been dealt with. And meantime, I sought out Dr. Black, who works with Larry Goldenberg, who was absolutely amazing. And one evening, I'm sitting at the table, and my wonderful, kind, compassionate doctor, Eddie Bernstein, who's here tonight, phoned me and said, "Hey, Bear, I need to come down and see you." I'm going, uh-oh, for Eddie to come down and see me, that was a little scary. So Eddie came down and said, the cystology is not looking good. The only alternative is you're going to have to lose your bladder. And so that's when all the tests started, and having back to St. Mary's and going back to the hospital to get this and that tested. And I guess the first thing they did is I had to come to St. Mary's and get a cardiogram. And I'm shaken up. I'm not wanting to go through all these tests. It's not something I was past the point of denial, but I was continuing to work and putting it on during the day as best as I could. And I got to the second floor of St. Mary's, and the nurse comes running down, who I hadn't seen for years. She was in my grade 8 class. And she said, Barry, I get to do your cardiogram. And we went in a room, and she said, "Okay, now you get set here. I'm going to go get some stuff. You just take your clothes off, and I'll be right back." So got my shirt off, and I'm just taking my pants down, and the nurse comes in and says, "Are you here for cardiogram?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Why are you taking all your clothes off?" She said, "Did Brenda tell you to take your clothes off?" Brenda came in and said, "Oh." And then came the tests. I had to go in St. Paul's and get this and that done. And I wasn't sure what test it was that they needed me to do at St. Paul's, but it was after a long weekend. And I checked online, and the ferries were just so backed up. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to get on my bike. And so I just got on my bike and rode into St. Paul's and took my bike up to the office and sat there. And this fella came out and said, "Whose bike?" I said, "It's mine." He goes, "Nice bike, huh? We got talking. He said, "You're here for a stress test." I went, oh yeah, okay. He said, "Where'd you ride from?" I said, "Well, Horseshoe Bay." He said, "Go home. Go on. I think you're okay." So, getting through those tests was an ordeal, and I didn't realize just how much you had to for the kind of surgery I was going to get. There was 3 choices. I could get, a vent here to be catheterized, or I could get a pouch on the inside, or I could get what's called a neobladder, which means that a new bladder would be created, and I get hooked up to that, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to write my name in the snow. It would seem to be the thing that would work for me. So when I went into the surgery, I said, "Okay, Holly, when I come out," because they weren't sure until they got in there, and Dr. Black said, we're shooting for what's called the neobladder, and that's taking a piece of your intestine, making a new bladder, inserting that, and hooking you up. I said, when I come to, 1 is the neobladder, okay, 2 is the vent, so on. And so when I opened my eyes, Holly went 1, and for me that was really positive. But it's different for every person. Some choose other solutions for different reasons. But going into the surgery, I grew up in the ring as a kid, and I remember when the referee would go, and that meant there was 10 seconds. And during that 10 seconds, you knew it made the difference of whether you won your bout or didn't, and you were tired, your legs were heavy, you couldn't hold your arms up. But that 10 seconds meant everything that you'd trained for the last several months. And I tried to put that in perspective for going into this surgery. This is just going to be 10 seconds, and I'm just going to endure this, and I'm just going to think positively and do my absolute best there. Coming out of that surgery was difficult. It was an 8-hour surgery, and Dr. Black was absolutely amazing. And it was at St. Paul's, and the care was incredible. It was it was a staff of primarily Filipino nurses who were just wonderful and telling me stories about their husbands and their partners, and being professors and all these sort of things. It was really, really interesting. And I didn't know what kind of care I qualified, and I certainly have shared that with other people in my profession, that you really need to look into that. I was in a room with 3 other people, so there was 4 of us, and one of the people was a drug addict who was having a really difficult time and was really, really angry, and he'd go outside and have a toke, and then he'd have a cigarette, and he'd spray himself with Axe, and he was abusive to the nurses, and it was really difficult being in there. And I ended up having a conversation with this poor fella, and his background was such that I kind of got it. And it didn't feel great being in that situation where I was trying to wrap my head around what had happened. But I got out of there in a week and went home. And my lovely children had decided that Dad really needed a dog to get him back on his feet. We'd always been dog people. We hadn't had a dog for a few years, so they found this dog that was needing a home. It was he's currently a 140-pound Alaskan Malamute, and it's become a therapy dog. But that certainly for me was incredible therapy and thoughtful for my kids to get me up and walking. And it's interesting. Going through something like that, I really wanted to get back to work. I loved this new job, and I loved that community of Pender Harbor where I was, and I started exercising as soon as I possibly could, probably a little too soon. But I was getting out and doing things, and I was really aimed at getting myself back there. When I got home and was trying to heal, one of my close friends came over, and I was coming down the stairs in our house, and he was talking to me. And as I was talking to him, I didn't realize I was just peeing down my leg. I didn't have any sensation or any control. And that set me back for a while, because I had to learn how to do that all over again, how to control those kinds of muscles and things. And so that was a difficult part. But certainly with the support of friends, I had asked my wife Holly, I said, when I'm in the hospital, I don't want to see anyone. I don't want to talk to anyone. I just want to get through this. And I had quite a few friends, many who are in the audience here tonight, who said, forget that, we're coming. And boy, did I ever appreciate that. I know the things Dr. Goldenberg showed up about, when we start feeling things go sideways, we just don't bother. We are taught to suck it up and be tough, and I didn't want to go on whining about things that I thought are just going to go away. And perhaps if I had gone in earlier, it might not have had to have been so severe. But I've certainly learned that. When I hear stories about people who've had cancer, and I recognize that look, and I recognize how every person's story is really, really different and really unique to themselves, I seek out those friends, and I really learn to listen, because that was certainly what worked for me, of having friends who were just there to listen and giving you the confidence and the support to be able to move forward. And it's having been through cancer, and it'll be 5 years this December, and I still go in for checks once every 6 months and see Dr. Black once a year. It's something that I don't really like to talk about that much. This was difficult for me putting this together. It's become very personal, and I know when I do talk about it, it raises lots of questions, and lots of people are asking me lots and lots of questions, and I kind of haven't wanted that to be my story, so I've read it, kept it fairly personal, and for me to give back was I felt so grateful for the care that I've had, the support of my friends and my family, and this, like I said, St. Mary's, just an unbelievable care. I was just so grateful. I joined a friend into that ride to conquer cancer, and being at the starting line there, and just before they, shot the gun and everybody's riding off to Seattle, the fellow says, collectively, we've raised $9 million. And to be part of that and feel and give back, and all that goes into, cancer research in Canada is a really powerful thing. I think about the doctors too, who hear every different story every day, and the compassion that I certainly felt from doctors who were there and being such powerful listeners and just being so very supportive, because that has, for me, had such a big impact on my ability to heal quickly and to open my heart for people who struggle with cancer. Craig and I, we a few years ago were asked to be bartenders at the Ruby Slipper. And Craig and I go back a long way. We've played sports together. We've went to prenatal when our children were born. Our children have grew up together. And Craig and I were at the Ruby Slipper serving, and we just looked at each other and said, we gotta do something like this for include men as well. And that was the origin of the Black Boot. And Craig will talk a little more about that. But thank you very much for coming this evening, and thank you for listening to my story.
Thanks, Barry. So the Black Boot, you guys, will be November 18th at Sechelt Legion. We got a West African band coming, 3-time Juno Award winner Alpha Yaya Diallo, and also Joe Stanton, Simon Parody. There'll be a silent auction, and all the monies go to the Ruby Slipper Fund. So, like Barry said, we used to work bar together at the Cops for Cancer, Ruby Slipper, and I thought it would be a nice thing to do something for the men for a change, because there was all these events going on for the women. So I came up with the idea of getting the boys together for poker and getting some dancers, and my wife looked at me and said, Craig, that will not fly. So we compromised, and we've got something now for the couples. It's very successful, and all the money goes to Ruby Slippers. So getting back to me now, I'm 63 in February at the age of 59. After my wife and my daughter persisted on telling me to go see the doctor and get a PSA test, which I didn't even know what that was, I decided to go, and I got my blood work done. And I still wonder to this day why I waited so long. And part of it is because I tend to procrastinate when I'm not sure about a certain outcome, so I push it off that way. But I've really thought about it, and it was my innate fear of the healthcare system, of doctors, nurses, hospitals. Hospitals were a place I didn't go to unless I absolutely had to. So I had to overcome the fear of that. And, it's amazing. After I went through my surgery, my radiation, hormone therapy, my perception of all that was wrong. And on every level, from my Hill Jones is here tonight, Brian, and my surgeon, the post-op nurses, the radiologists at the Cancer Society were amazing. I was on that 620 boat for 34 mornings. Even the BC ferries were great. I had one guy who was the parking lot attendant, and I had a tap for him which assured me loading every time I came back. And I got in one day, and the ferry was leaving in about 5 minutes, and this guy said, you know what, you're getting on. So I just found on every level that everybody treated me with respect and dignity, which I think is important for all of us when you're that vulnerable and you're needing help. So I think we're blessed to live in this country and have the health care we do have. And I also had support from my family, so I had people running shotgun with me every day in Vancouver. My brother was there for me, my wife was there for me, my daughter, good buddies, my nephews would all go in with me, and it was great having that. And at the end of the day, I mean, I was fortunate. I had an amazing mother who's no longer with us. She was always very inspirational to me. She went through a lot in her life, and she always went through with a smile, it seemed. So she was with me every step of the way, and here I am 3 years later, and I'm feeling good. Thank you.